online homework. It's not the sexiest topic on the conference agenda this weekend. I'm a bit nervous about presenting on this, and it's it seems like I'm pitting them together at a conference sponsored by Macmillan. But online homework, I really think it's an important part of our job, and it plays a larger role in our class than we sometimes realize, because it can be a pain to use. There's a lot of issues. So today I'm looking at 4 homework systems that I've used over the last 3 years. So I'm not up here pretending to be an expert in any of these systems. I'm sure a lot of you have used 1 or 2 of these systems longer than I have. I'm up here because I've used the 4 systems, so I think I have a unique perspective on how they kind of compare, the pros and cons of each. So I'll start off by going through each system, going over what I liked, going over what I didn't like, and then the second half will be what I learned going over being forced to work with 4 systems. So that being said, I really encourage everyone to interrupt me, offer comments or questions while I'm going, especially as I go through each slide. If you think I'm getting something right or wrong, or if you just want to heckle me, feel free to interrupt me. So I like to think of Aplia as the Microsoft Office of the online homework systems. It's been around forever. It's what a lot of us know. It's actually over 15 years ago what I used as a student. So we're all familiar with it. And that's definitely not a bad thing. I think because of this, it's one of the most reliable platforms out there. And fairly reliable questions as well, because they've really been battle tested, especially their algorithm-based questions. And they also have, out of all the systems, one of the largest number of algorithm-based questions. The last thing I liked, and I think this counts for a lot, is it's the prettiest system out there. It looks fancy, especially to our students. I think that matters more than we realize sometimes, how pretty it is, especially with the recent MindTap updates. So that's one of the biggest benefits with Aplia. So that being said, as good as it is on the student-facing side, for instructors, I find it can be a bit confusing and awkward to use, especially when you have to build an assignment or create or edit any type of item. It can be really difficult. My biggest pet peeve is you look at a question, you don't think you want to use it, so you remove it, you delete it, and it's gone forever. It's into the ether. You can't get it back. If you change your mind the next day, you can't put it back in. So I kind of use Aplia as you build it once, hopefully if I'm ambitious, a few weeks before term, but a lot of times during term, and then I don't touch it because it's so tough to kind of tweak and edit. There are some workarounds. You can kind of do a parallel class system, so if you don't want a question, you can drag it in there, but I don't know. That's a big pain, and I don't know, after all these updates, why they haven't addressed that. The other issue with Aplia is there's not, especially relative to some of these other systems, not a lot of questions to use from. So with the MindTap update, they've kind of, it doesn't work great, but they allow you to choose questions from other textbooks, which helps a bit. But I find Aplia, too, their questions are very textbook specific. They're specific to MenQ or a different book, so it's difficult to use questions from other textbooks. Let's move on to MyEconLab. So this is the other big established system that I used. Like Aplia, it's been around for a while, so I also think it's a fairly reliable system. Works fairly well. My favorite thing with MyEconLab is the ability to set conditions. And I think the example I use is kind of their best practice. It's, let's say you're doing an elasticity assignment this week. You break it into 2 parts. You have the practice portion that's not for grades. It's there for students to practice. And then you have the graded part, the one that actually counts for grades. So you can set a condition. Usually what they recommend is you set a condition where the students have to do the practice assignment at least once, and then have to get at least 70% or whatever minimum grade you want before they can access the graded assignment. So it's kind of a unique grading setup, it's kind of innovative. Your bright students can just bomb through the practice portion and move on to the graded one quickly. Your weaker students can go through it a lot of times. And if you set up a lot of algorithm-based questions, it can be pretty valuable for your weaker students. But it's fairly flexible in terms of conditions. So I know a lot of people have come up with hacks. One of my favorite hacks that I stole from a colleague of mine is called the Day 1 quiz. I don't know if any of you else use this. So you make a Day 1 quiz, so it's the first quiz they ever get in the course. And you call it the Day 1 quiz because it's just questions on material you'll go over on Day 1. And it feeds in nicely into talk Kalina did yesterday. She talked about how, and it kind of came up naturally in discussion, how do we get our students to read emails or the syllabus or understand stuff. So MyEconLab can do things like the Day 1 quiz, where you put questions in there like, I don't know, really dumb questions that we all get emails over all the time, like where's my office, what are my office hours, what happens if an assignment's late, or what happens if you miss a midterm and email me 4 weeks later. We shouldn't have to put these in there, but you put them in there and you set a condition. They have to get 100% until they can access anything in the course, before they can do any graded work. So it's kind of nice. I think just going through that, students, them actively typing out what your rules and regulations are, they actually remember it. And it's really nice if you get any issues, which we always do. We always get a few problem students later in the term. They say, I didn't know I was supposed to contact you right after I missed an exam or something. It's nice you can really corner them into a lose-lose situation. So you say, well, it was on the Day 1 quiz, and you force them in a lose-lose where they have to admit, all right, yeah, I did the Day 1 quiz, so I guess at some point I was more aware than I'm letting on. Or they admit, I cheated, or I had a friend do it. So they admit to an academic offense. They never take that option. So it can be nice for ending some issues. It always comes in handy a couple times in a term. And I found you don't have to just do it Day 1. You can do it a few times. Because something comes up, you want to get a piece of maybe administrative information across. You want to make sure they get it. You can just put a conditional test in there. And if someone doesn't read or do it, you can put the gears to them a bit. So that's one of my favorite features of MyEconLab. Also, I find it has a fairly large question bank. So what didn't I like with MyEconLab? It's a really awkward, it feels like the most outdated old system. The user interface isn't that friendly to students or instructors. In general, I find there's a lot of menus, way too many links. It makes it really confusing. And most of these menus or links we never use, or we'll use 10% of the time. So it's really cluttered. It makes it really confusing. If you want to make an assignment or do any setting, it's a lot of clicks. You got to click through a lot of pages to get anything done, even just create an assignment or something simple. Or if you want to make a minor edit to an assignment, you're in for a lot of clicks. And there's also a lot of annoying pop-up windows. A lot. Are you sure you want to do this? You're going to do this? Are you sure? Danger, danger, you're changing the grade settings. Well, yeah, that's what I've been trying to spend the last 5 minutes doing, like decreasing the weight here. So it's really annoying. It feels like, I don't know, an internet browser from the 90s in some ways. So that's my biggest, the biggest drawback, I think, with MyEconLab. The other issue, I kind of like algorithm-based questions. They don't have a lot of algorithm-based questions. I think that's kind of a function of they want you to use their conditional setup where you give them a practice assignment and then they only see the graded assignment once, but not a lot of algorithm-based questions, which can be a bit disappointing. But they have a larger test bank. It's easy to access across textbooks, and so that can kind of make up for it. So move on to the newer players. So first one I'll look at, actually one more point on MyEconLab and these in general. So all these systems, with the exception of MyEconLab, I've used at least once in my principles classes of 300 or 400. MyEconLab is the only exception. I've only used that in my intermediate macro class, and they're smaller classes of like 70 or 80. So next I'll look at Sapling, one of the rookies or the young guns. So Sapling's a newer system. That being said, it's got a fairly reliable, robust platform. I find it to be fairly user-friendly, although I found talking to people this weekend that might be a bit controversial. So the Sapling is Moodle-based, and I find a lot of people either love or hate Moodle. Same with a lot of systems like Blackboard or the other systems. My school switched their LMS, the learning management system for Blackboard, to Moodle about 5 years ago, so it's what I know. I'm probably biased. When I started using Sapling, I'm like, wow, this is so intuitive, this and that. I'm like, well, I've been using Moodle for 5 years already, so take that for what it is. But it seems like talking to people, the ones that use Sapling, it has been, most find it to be fairly intuitive, the interface. Sapling has a massive, massive library. I found they had the biggest library of questions of any system. And a lot of them they do have questions specific to your textbook, but a lot of ones are just textbook agnostic. You can use really with any principles text, which is nice. My favorite feature, though, is probably, I don't know if they still call them this, but they're tech TAs. So when you sign up to use Sapling, you're assigned a tech TA. So it's one person to provide you support. With them, they have the requirement that they have to have a graduate degree in economics. I had an excellent tech TA. He had a PhD in econ. He'd been teaching and was currently teaching economics at a college in Colorado. So that was really huge. He had all the IT support, but having someone there that can really relate to you with those problems was a huge benefit. So great support with Sapling as well. So the bad, I found the questions to have a lot of errors. And the answers had a lot of errors, which was a real pain. Once you find this out, you have to spend a lot more time than normal creating and reviewing your assignments. And the thing is, especially with algorithm-based questions, you can look through a question a few times, and it seems fine, and then your students use it, it's a different algorithm, and it's just glitching every fifth time with that algorithm. That's really frustrating. So I found a lot of errors. A lot of them were specific to Canada, so I don't know how relevant that is. It's not relevant at all, I guess, at a conference like this. Some of the US ones were glitching, but I know Sapling was very aware of this, and they're going to put a lot of time and resources into it. So I think they've kind of had that fixed. I found out actually halfway through the semester I was the first user in Canada to use Sapling, the first major user. So that might have been, so I should give them a free pass maybe on the Canadian questions. So the fourth system I'll use, and it's the most unique one, is FlipItEcon. So I was pretty hesitant to try FlipItEcon. The flipped classroom concept, I don't know. It seemed trendy. Didn't really understand it. It seemed like when a rep is telling you something, they always make it seem like it doesn't take any time. It's going to be so easy to implement, and it doesn't end up being that way. But FlipItEcon actually was easy to implement. Easy or easier than the other three systems to implement and kind of manage once the term got going. So it's not as weird as it seems at first. So what FlipItEcon does, I'll do a brief summary, but I don't want to steal Jose's thunder. He's going to talk on this in a couple hours. But they give you the traditional homework questions just like the other systems do. So you assign these after class once you've covered that material. They give you a bunch of material to do before class. So they give you videos and questions to assign to your students before class. And it's really well done. The videos are really short. A lot are 30 seconds to 90 seconds, so they're really short. It usually takes your students 5 or 10 minutes to do that. And then they do bridge questions, and they're just there for participation marks. Just try it out. It really gets the juices flowing before class. So there's a few things that surprised me with FlipItEcon. The biggest one, I kind of viewed these videos as a substitute for reading the text before class, which we know none of our students actually do. So I thought, hey, let's do these videos. One big surprise was I really think it actually encouraged how many students read the textbook before class. I didn't see that coming, but now that I use FlipItEcon, I get a ton of emails, a lot of visits during office hours, students asking about concepts that they saw in FlipItEcon but we haven't covered in class. Like, hey, I don't really understand cross-price elasticity. In the textbook, it said this and this and this. I see that in my emails and office hours. So that's really good. I think it actually increases how many students read the textbook before class because they watch a video, gets them a bit curious, they see a question that stumps them, or they want to get right, and that encourages them to go into the textbook for a little resource, and all that stuff is so good before class. So I really saw my students showing up better prepared. And that was really reflected in in-class discussions and the questions I got in class. They're a lot more in-depth, they're a lot smarter because students had seen this a day before. And even for my really weak students, at least they know we're covering something called elasticity today. They kind of get a general outline. There's that benefit. If it's all Greek to them, nothing makes sense, at least they know what to expect when they come to class that week. So another thing I really like with FlipItEcon is it's textbook agnostic. So you can use it across different platforms. I use it with Krugman for my macro classes, and I use it with Manque for my micro classes. And Manque is obviously, it's a Nelson book, so it's totally fine across different publishers, different textbooks. So that's one really nice thing. And because the videos are really just definitions and concepts, that also helps them work with different textbooks as well. So I found no issues using it with different textbooks. And I also like that they seem to be the first company to unbundle the textbook and homework systems. We're all economists in here. We know how much market power a firm gets from bundling their products. So you got to give these guys a lot of credit for being one of the first to unbundle. Students definitely like it. Gives them a lot of options on how to get the textbook, on how to save money, but allows you to it doesn't force you to choose the textbook and the online homework system, which is how it currently is with a lot of systems. You can choose your favorite online homework system and then choose your textbook you like, which really nice, makes it a lot more flexible. And again, FlipItEcon also has great support. I think in general with the smaller players, you get great support, but with FlipItEcon, really great support. Not that you really need it. I didn't really encounter many issues, but it's always nice to have. So what didn't I like about FlipItEcon? So the user interface, it's a fairly new product, so the user interface can be a bit confusing to students and instructors, especially in the first couple weeks. After that, it's pretty easy. So MyEconLab, it can be tough the whole semester through it. It's not like it becomes cleaner or there's less pages to navigate. With FlipItEcon, it can be a bit awkward at first, going through different systems. But after a week or two, your students figure everything out. As an instructor, you also figure out the little quirks, and it runs fine after that. The other thing, and it's a product of them being a new system, it's not as pretty as the established players, especially Aplia. So not as pretty or polished as the other systems. So what did I learn using 4 different online homework systems? That wasn't really the reason to experiment. I don't really know why I did this, what that says about my personality, using so many systems over a short time period. But you do learn a lot. They each force you to look at homework, approach it in a different manner, especially with the grading structure. They all have kind of a unique grading structure. So I learned a few things from that. When I started teaching, I had this belief that homework had to be worth a lot. It had to be worth 20%, otherwise students wouldn't take it seriously. And also the grading structure had to be fairly strict. I had to make it worth only best of 1 attempt, or I'll give them 3 attempts but take average of 3 attempts. So there's an incentive there for students to try harder, try and get it right the first time. So I kind of had a lot of these beliefs. So this is data I've got from using the few systems. A few notes. I omitted MyEconLab because I use it for intermediate macro. So the average was about 5 percentage points lower. And with my intermediate macro, it's a smaller class. Here the sample sizes aren't identical, but most of them are big, 300 or 400. So as you move from As you move to the left, it kind of gets higher stakes. As you move to the right, it gets lower stakes. So like I said, I started out homework. I thought it had to be worth a lot. I made it worth 20% of the overall grade. And I made the grading structure fairly strict. My Aplia rep talked me into using average of 3 attempts. So I started out that way. And I just kind of slowly relaxed. Not really intentionally, but because I started using these other systems and they all have unique best practices, I slowly relaxed. With Aplia, I relaxed to best of 3 attempts and then finally unlimited attempts. Sapling is a bit unique. How they use it is students get 100 points, possible points on a question. They get unlimited attempts, but each attempt they get wrong, they use 5 percentage points. So if you get it wrong, max you get is 95. If you get it wrong again, you can get 90. So they all have their unique systems. I didn't really know exactly how to move it along the spectrum with higher stakes and lower stakes for Sapling. And then FlipItEcon is unlimited attempts. With their videos, as long as students watch them, do the questions, they get 100. Same with the questions before class, as long as they participate, they get 100. The traditional homework ones, they have to get it right, but they can have multiple attempts. And they have a pretty good algorithm. Each question, like let's say it's a question on income elasticity, there'll be 5 questions in there. All of them are a bit unique, so we'll run through that. So it's a fairly good algorithm, but as long as you eventually get it right, you get full marks. So the really crazy thing for me, this didn't impact any of the major numbers. It didn't really impact class average at all or the standard deviation at all. So I was really surprised. This might not be that shocking. The title isn't that shocking. We all know online homework is bad assessment, and I don't think anyone, especially on the publishing side, it's not really intended to be assessed. It's there for them to practice, right? But it's really important to keep that in mind when we're using homework. To keep in mind, this isn't there for assessment. It's just to get them to practice and giving them a few incentives to actually take it seriously and do it. But still, and most of these sample sizes are 400 or 300 students. It doesn't seem to have any impact on class average or standard deviation. I guess I threw in standard deviation to show how god-awful it is for assessments. But I really thought with FlipItEcon, I was hesitant. If I give them unlimited attempts, how can you not get 100, right? You have unlimited attempts, and it's multiple choice, so you just click A 4 times. We know the expected value should say you get after clicking A 4 times, you should just get the right answer. And so I can't believe even with unlimited attempts, and there I just made 10% of the grade, it really didn't affect the class average much. So related to this, I kind of like this title because most of us teach principles, and we spend a lot of the semester trying to emphasize incentives matter, and economics is about incentives. The funny thing, if you look at the general population, I think students are one area where incentives don't really matter. I'm really baffled at what motivates my students and what doesn't motivate. So kind of touched on this already, but it doesn't seem if the assignment's worth a lot, if it's high stakes, or if it's not worth much, it's low stakes. If you give them just average of 3 attempts, so if they get 0 on the first question, it's going to be really tough to do better. Or if they get unlimited attempts, none of that seemed to affect the class average, the standard deviation. I added in this slide the class participation. The numbers were so high, I said as soon as participating if they get over 50 on the homework over the term. And even with that strict setup, you can see most are 98, 99, 97. So I was really surprised this had no impact on perceived student effort and also on the assessment side. So I guess if we know online homework is bad assessment, and from looking at my data, it doesn't seem to motivate or not motivate students. You can drop it. I don't know how low you could go. I'm kind of curious if anyone uses their homework is worth less than 10%. But if these are true, I think the best practice for online homework is to use it low stakes. It's good for our overall course assessment. The smaller we can make it worth, then it doesn't really screw up our overall class distribution. And I think there's a lot of benefits to the learning side with low stakes testing. And it kind of gets that question someone just asked. And it's kind of funny. I know low stakes testing is really trendy, or it's talked a lot about publishing world, and there's a ton of pedagogical research. there's something to be said for going through it yourself, making all these mistakes and kind of coming out aha on your own. But I really think there's some big benefits to low stakes testing. In general, and what students have told me is they just feel safe, a lot safer attempting the problems, safer making mistakes when you give them unlimited attempts and when it's not worth that much. And that's massive. That's exactly what we want homework to be. We all know it's cliche, but it's so true. They learn more from their mistakes than what they get right. So if we can make it a safe place for them to attempt what we covered in class, make mistakes, that's huge. I think that really improves learning outcomes. And there's a lot to be said in general, lowering that extrinsic motivation. I feel like if we're forcing homework on students, making it worth a lot, or saying you only get one attempt, one chance to get it right, I feel like that changes the dynamic a bit. You get rid of any intrinsic motivation. I don't know if it's ever there for our principal students, but when we do that, I feel like they're going to resent it more. They're more likely to try to game it, cheat on it, reverse engineer a question. Whereas if you just make it low stakes, give them unlimited attempts, they'll genuinely use it for what it should be, a safe place to practice and make mistakes. The other thing, selfish reason from instructor's perspective, it lowers a lot of admin work and stress. So if you make it high stakes and the system glitches or you glitch, you design a question wrong, students get really mad if it's worrisome, if it hurts their grade. If it's unlimited attempts, then they just say, it's usually just a polite email saying, hey, by the way, this happened, or this glitch. Like, obviously, I just moved on next question, got that right, so it didn't hurt my grade, but FYI, here it is. Versus if it's like average of 3 attempts, or if they get hurt for that. And even though you can almost always go in there and remove that question so their grade isn't hurt, it's a lot of angry emails if it's actually worth something. So that's nice as well. So conclude there. I really encourage you. It seems crazy to experiment with homework systems, but it's not as bad as it seems at first. After that first week, it's not that bad. So I really encourage you to experiment with systems, and I kind of encourage you to see how low you can go. I'm going to keep dropping what my course is worth. I'm going to stick with the unlimited attempts. I'm curious to see how low I can go until I see drop-off in participation or a big change, any learning outcomes like marks on my exams or anything like that. I really think low stakes has a lot of benefits. So I'll end there, and if there's any questions, I'll take the questions.